COVID-19 has hurt the economy. Companies have been forced to cut staff and salaries to stay afloat. PwC has compiled a report on how the pandemic has affected boardroom decisions. To discuss this then, I'm joined by Andreas Horak, who was one of the lead people in that particular exercise undertaken by PwC. So in terms of what you did, you based your observations on directors and executive pay and remuneration on what was transpiring in the big listed JSE companies. Just give me a sense of what you were looking for and what you found.
So, good morning. Yes, I think the research was conducted over the JSE listed companies that were actively trading. There was about 285 companies that we evaluated, and over 700 executive director roles were scrutinized that consist of CEOs, CFOs, and other executive directors whose remuneration is disclosed in the public domain. I think from an overall perspective, what do we normally want to achieve? We want to be able to identify what does the median CEO in South Africa earn. That is, when you have a look at all the 285 companies collectively, and that landed on 5.14 million as the average salary that they earn during a financial year. When we compared it against the chief financial officers, were earning about 35% less than the CEOs, so they were earning about between 3.5 and 3.7 million rands per year. And then we had a look at how the gender stats backed up with regards to how are females compensated relative to males, what is the representation of females versus males, and we also did a race analysis. So those are the typical broad overarching reviews that we do, and then we break it down on a per sector basis to make sure that we can evaluate how does the basic materials, which is primarily the mining sector, compare against financial services and consumer goods. So the analysis is quite granular, but the highlights that I mentioned now are the key features from a quantitative perspective.
Yeah, in fact, let me start by saying that the median being 5.1 million rand for a CEO, not too shabby in a year when there's been lockdown and all these financial challenges. But of course, there's a whole narrative and a debate, ongoing debate about the levels of executive pay in this country. But you raised an important point. One of the dimensions you looked at was the gender pay gap, that dynamic. What did you observe there?
So I think there was two stark observations. The first thing is that when it comes, when you evaluate the gender pay gap, you must start off with identifying how's the representation of females relative to males in the executive director circles. And we've noted that it sort of stagnated over the last few years. It's still below a fifth. It hovers around 13 to 14% representation, which are female. And unfortunately, the pay gap that we've noted probably also stagnated and consistently remains between 20 and 30% and can go up to as much as 40% in certain industries. So overall, not any real progression has been noted with regards to those two stats. The one thing that was noted that from a basic materials perspective, where predominantly it's made up of mining companies, they've done something right, because when you have a look at their pay gap, the pay gap effectively is completely eliminated. To be quite frank, females actually earn about 4% more than males in those industries. So I think there is positive signs that certain industries have done the right steps in trying to make sure that they can achieve parity between males and females.
So part of what you did as well was to look at how the various measures that have been taken that have impacted on the economy and the ability of companies to operate, how that has impacted on performance targets, which are linked to bonuses in the private sector. Just talk to me about that dynamic. Not being able to work means that you are unlikely to achieve many of the targets that are set if you are an executive, for example. But there's still these dynamics that have to do with what are the obligations then of the remuneration committees on the boards of these companies towards you.
No, critical question. So we've seen before COVID became a reality for all of us, there was a massive move that bonuses should become more formulaic with guided or limited discretion being applied with regards to how the bonuses are set and paid. And through the formulaic approach, scrutiny must be applied with regards to how the targets are set that drives the formula to make sure the targets are appropriately calibrated and they're stretching. In a COVID environment, though, those type of formulas goes out the window to a large extent, and you need the human factor to enter again. And boards have to exert their discretion. So typical things that we've noted was that in many instances, boards said that they need to downsize bonuses. So you can't earn a same or a similar typical bonuses than what you would have earned through applying the basic formula. So the quantum should be suppressed, but that the targets should then be adjusted commensurately as well, and that there should be a focus on different things. It might be that you need to focus on liquidity and cash flow in your business in the imminent term rather than profitability. Or you need to go and have a look at how you can effectively reduce costs without having to lay employees off extensively to be able to manage that burden. I think the major tension point between boards and shareholders in the tug of war is the way discretion is applied and the way it's disclosed. Shareholders want to get a decent understanding how you've applied your mind and what was the rationale, and they want to be able to see whether they feel that was reasonable in the circumstance. So proactive and continuous engagement between boards and shareholders remain critical. Otherwise, there's a breakdown of trust and it causes animosity.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your insights there, Andreas Horak, who is one of the co-leads in that study that was done by PwC, looking at the situation around executive and director pay in the past year, in particular, during the course of the pandemic. This is Newslink. I'm back